And I've got a lovely Burr Island gin and tonic.
I've
So
also put really annoying ice cubes in the
Yeah,
gin and tonic,
sorry.
which our editor, apologies,
yeah,
is
sorry.
going to
Sorry,
complain
Scott.
about.
Sorry, Scott. I'll maybe try not to drink it on the way through. I'll have a big slurp now, and then not have any till the end when we do a little cheers. There you go. That's my promise. Sorry, Scott. Sorry.
Welcome to How to Take the Lead, the podcast where we challenge the myths and stereotypes of what it means to be a leader today and help you to succeed in post without compromise. I'm Lee Griffith.
And I'm Carrie-Anne Wade, and together we will be your guides, questioning everything we've ever learnt about leadership, sharing our experiences along the way, and inspiring you to make a real impact in your role.
Visit howtotakethelead.com for show notes, past episodes, and to join our community.
Enjoy this episode. Welcome, listeners, to what is... Oh, I love the jazz hands there. For those who are not watching on YouTube, Lee was doing some very fabulous jazz hands to go with a very fabulous outfit, I have to say.
Well, so can we just have a moment for said outfit? Because this, you might recognise, was the dress that I paid a bloody fortune for Carrie-Anne's wedding and haven't had a chance to wear since.
I do recognise, and it looks gorgeous, and it's bringing back all the memories.
I thought we got shortlisted for an award recently. Just
drop that in there.
And and I thought, perfect. I'll get another wear. My pound per wear ratio can be reduced by wearing it to this award thing. And then that was too trendy, and I couldn't wear this. It was too.
Just very glamorous.
It's just it's yeah.
Chic and glam. Well, because welcome to what is the last episode of this series. So we've gone celebratory, like end of series kind of wrap party mode, haven't we? So let's get dressed up. Let's have a little drinky poo. We haven't done that in a long while on a How to Take the Lead episode. So I'm quite glad that we've brought the celebratory drinks back. And mentioning my wedding, another little plug for my wedding, which was the last series of Take the Lead. We were talking about having the wedding, I think, or just having had the wedding. And this one, it was last year. How has that happened? Getting ready for the old first wedding anniversary soon. And I've got a lovely Burr Island gin and tonic. So
I've also put really annoying ice cubes in the
gin
and
tonic, sorry.
Which our editor, apologies,
is
going to complain
Scott.
about.
Sorry, Scott. I'll maybe try not to drink it on the way through. I'll have a big slurp now, and then not have any till the end when we do a little cheers. There you go. That's my promise. Sorry, Scott. Sorry. So our last episode of this series of How to Take the Lead, all the Burr Island vibes going on with the dress and the gin, which I'm loving.
And we did not coordinate.
No, we didn't. So that's just a weird little thing that's happened, a bit spooky.
We're slowly evolving into one another.
Yeah, we did promise at something we attended recently that we do stuff separately as well. We don't always come as a pair, but you know.
With the modern day Chaz and Dave, Chuckle Brothers, you name your duo of choice.
Whatever duo of choice you'd like. Maybe share that on socials, get in touch, tell us which famous duo you'd most liken us to. I'm always going for Ant and Dec, but that's only for the photo shoot moment. So if you know, you know. If you've been on the Insta, you'll know that. But anyhow, we digress. So we've got that happy end of series vibe going on here. And before I get into the main topic of conversation, obviously just reminding people that we are on all of the podcast platforms. So whichever is your favourite, you can listen to us there. You can subscribe, so we drop straight into your inbox when new episodes land. We are also on YouTube if you'd like to watch us along the way rather than just listen, and we are on Substack, so there will be an article with every episode as well as some in-between musings which will give you more exclusive content, thoughts, all of that kind of jazz over on Substack. And on the socials, do let us know which duo we most remind you of. It's going to be the Chuckle Brothers, isn't it? Over on our Instagram, you can catch up with us there, leave a comment, DM. So I think that's everything I need to share by way of starting. Have I forgotten anything, Lee?
No, all is good.
Fabulous. I just feel you're very regal sat there. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving this vibe. It's like a new kind of
Well, Carrie Ann, do you know
dynasty kind of vibe going on.
Rather than get out of my pub.
Get out my pub. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's like end of term vibes here.
Yeah.
So we will get on with this last conversation of the series, and it's I don't want to say a weird one because that's not really selling it to listeners. But
Thanks. Well done.
What we were planning to talk about is so we're all about the learning, we're all about the improving. But what we wanted to talk about was what you might need to unlearn in order to be a better leader. So that is the topic of conversation for this final episode. And I think it's potentially quite easy to get a bit set in our ways as a leader. We talk a lot about pushing outside of our comfort zone, but most of us know where we feel like we operate possibly at our best, but definitely at our most comfortable. And as listeners will know, we are all about challenging that status quo. And we think it's really important to consider what things we might need to unlearn in order to better ourselves in that leadership space. So that's what we're going to talk about this episode. And Lee, I'm going to throw it over to you. You're like sort of pen at the ready, poised to give us some good content here. What exactly do we
not overpromise and underdeliver?
No, come on, we're going for it. We're going for it. What exactly do we mean by this phrase unlearn? Because I'm hearing it a bit more now in the leadership space, but it does feel like a sort of term that maybe people haven't been used to hearing. So what do we mean by unlearning?
Do you know, just as an aside, you're right, I've heard this term a lot and I've been reflecting on it a lot, but I used it for the first time probably about 9 to 10 months ago, and I hadn't really heard of it. Well, I hadn't heard of it before because I did think I invented that word.
So straight from the horse's mouth then, this is going to be a good response to the question.
Because I was doing some like reflection coaching practice, and I was like, do you know, it feels like I've almost got to unlearn what it is that I was taught. And I genuinely thought that this was a brand new word that I had created, and I was, going back to the thought leader.
So you were like well ahead of the time.
And then it's like literally everywhere. And now I don't know how I feel. So I was loving the word. Now I'm feeling like, oh, is it just one of those corporate BS
buzz? Yeah, is it a buzzword?
Buzzword, and I don't like it. And I'm feeling really torn because, like, there's a pride that I invented.
I was about to say, is this level of feeling torn because you're a bit disappointed that you didn't invent it? So obviously thinking about the bias that you might have in that. But for the sake of this episode, we've gone with unlearn. So what do we mean by the term unlearn? And when you first introduced that to the leadership world, Lee, what did you mean specifically by unlearning?
Well, I think for me, it's always been about giving myself permission to let go of old thinking or actions in order to make space for new stuff, and kind of referencing the point you said at the beginning about we're all about the learning and taking on new things. Our brains, our emotions, everything. We're like a computer hard drive. We get full up. We got to let some stuff go to let the new things come in. Otherwise, we've either got to overwrite or delete, or something's got to happen in order for us to develop, I think.
Are you sure you didn't? You sure you didn't invent this? Because I really loved that. I was like, yes, Lee, I'm loving this whole analogy. Absolutely. For me, it was about that evolution. So, it might be about your mindset. It might be about changing behaviours. And it doesn't always mean stopping something, I don't think, although it absolutely might. But it is about that growth and that evolution towards a new, hopefully better way of being.
And I was struggling a little bit with the notion of, you're letting go of old thinking, because I think when we say that, we often think, oh, it's out of date and outdated. And when we talk about leadership challenges and things we want to change, we talk about the old way of leading, and we do mean that in the kind of outdated modes. And I don't necessarily mean that when I say old here, because I don't really think that is the case. But I think it's about making sure we don't get stuck or we're being held back by things, because that's the way we've been taught we should do it. So there's a whole like neuroscience thing behind it, which is if you keep doing the same things all the time, you become resistant to change. And so working on undoing or unlearning helps you to create the little neural pathways.
Reset them.
Yeah, and we get to grow, and it helps us be more innovative and all of that kind of stuff. So,
and it's a bit like that. It's the whole habit forming thing, isn't it, with the neuroscience, that actually if you want to give up a bad habit, you almost have to create a new one to take the place and redirect the pathway to stop you from having the gin and tonic with the ice cubes in, or whatever it might be. And the more times you practice it, the more that becomes the kind of more updated way of doing things. So yeah, brilliant. I love that. Thank you, Lee.
So we're like the Apple operating system, where we just like variations, just slightly improving every time.
Yeah, I'm loving
Before we get dumped by our husbands and replaced by a younger model, like when Apple bring out a new version. I don't know why I said that. Neither of us have had that happen. Can I just say?
Not this time round. Yeah. I love it. See, it's only taken how many series for my total oversharer to come out. So moving us on, before this turns into a therapy session rather than something more useful for our listeners, I thought it might be helpful, though this may well become therapy, to be honest. I thought it might be helpful perhaps to give some examples from our own experiences about things, and this is to make it tangible and something that people can feel and see as real. What things might we have had to unlearn in our careers? So I'm delving a bit here and digging, Lee, so feel free to share what you're most comfortable sharing. But have there been specific things that you can almost pinpoint going, yeah, I had to unlearn that in my leadership journey so far? And I'm sure there might be more to come in the future, but
yes. I mean,
yes.
I think there's almost been like 3 stages, I'd say, to my unlearning in my life. So there's the kind of the corporate life where I had to unlearn all the things I'd learned about leadership, which is kind of what we try and do with this podcast in a way, which is stuff that was out of date, or attitudes and behaviors and stereotypes and all that, which I, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, that I thought was how I had to behave. So, you get the wrong role models and all of that. So I had to do some unlearning and learn what type of leader I wanted to be. I think also just from a professional point of view, we know professions evolve and adapt. And back in the day when we were both starting out in our communications careers, everyone wanted a spin doctor and wanted someone that could manage the media. And now, so you've got to do unlearning to think and talk like that to satisfy certain audiences. So I've got that. Then I've got my now business life, and I've had to do loads of unlearning in that. I had to unlearn how not to do a 9-to-5 working, like, the corporate conditioning of I get up at 9, work till 5. I mean, you obviously leadership roles, you do a lot longer than that, but I had to unlearn and redefine what that looked like for me. When I did my coach training, you get taught very specific models, you get assessed to deliver coaching in a very particular way. And then actually when you go out into the real world, as you start to implement that and you test it on real clients, you realise that what you get taught can be a bit too rigid and a bit too directive. And so, as I said, when I came up with the epiphany and invented the word unlearning, it was when I was doing some mentor coaching, and my mentor, we were like challenging what it meant to show up as a coach. And I was like, God, I really have to unlearn what I got taught in my training about this particular issue. So there's been those really practical things. And then I think the third area of unlearning is the real deep mindset stuff. So limiting beliefs or views that I've had that have perhaps held me back from growing as a person. So questioning whether I'm good enough, questioning why should I be the one doing this because someone else is more expert, all of those types of things. I've had to unlearn some of those narratives that might be playing. So that was
no. Sorry, I was only because I was making notes because so much of what you said resonated with me, particularly around the corporate and the business element of unlearning. And that's
you're doing them concurrently. So
I was going to say that's definitely been one for me that as you were talking, I was like, actually, yeah, I can really resonate with that because having to balance having a corporate leadership role and then also running my own business and having a different leadership role in that space has felt quite challenging. And I guess also the sector that I work in for my day job, you know, it's a bit about being apolitical and, you know, working in the public sector, which means I've had to sort of think very differently in that space around how I show up for my business and putting myself out there a bit more. And I've sort of had to unlearn some of what I've naturally maybe thought, I better keep some of that opinion to myself because that's maybe not going to go down so well in the corporate space. So that definitely resonated with me, alongside what you said about kind of questioning yourself and your validity of being in that space. So sort of that, you know, why would anybody want to listen to what I've got to say kind of thing. There was definitely some unlearning there. And when I posed the question to myself and reflected on it, a really big part of it for me has been around my sort of people pleasing tendencies and actually having to unlearn my desires to want to keep everybody happy and be liked by everyone as I've progressed through my leadership career, because actually it's not my job to necessarily be liked as a leader. It's my job to lead. And sometimes I have to take decisions that other people are not going to be happy with. And I've got to unlearn my own personal desires around wanting everybody to think I'm a nice person. So yeah, there's definitely been stuff that I've had to unlearn along the way as well. So thank you for sharing. I know sometimes we don't always get quite so direct with the personal questions, but I thought it would be helpful for listeners to hear a bit about our own experiences to maybe help frame some of their own reflections around what they might want to consider around unlearning.
Because it's a buzzword, it's perhaps still catching on in certain places, and people might think, well, unlearning, does that mean I've done something wrong? And it's not. We're not coming at this from a point of doing anything wrong. It's about evolution, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a lovely segue into what I wanted to touch on next, which is actually how do we know that we might need to unlearn something? Partly because maybe we are, like, this is a buzzword that we've not really heard or talked about before for ourselves, but also because there might be that, like, well, slight resistance to it because you're assuming it's about I've done something badly or I've done something wrong. So how do you think as leaders we kind of get that sense that we need to start unlearning certain things?
I think that, so for me, a lot of stuff always goes back to what's the outcome that you're seeking. And the question, I've said this on other episodes, a similar question, which is, what do I need to do differently to make it happen? And in those insights will be the things that you will need to change. And it might be thinking, it might be behaviours, it might be actions, and that might involve some level of unlearning. So I think in recognising that you need to change in some way to make something happen will bring a level of insight and focus on the things that you might want to tackle in terms of unlearning. But it is a work in progress, and like any habit change, it will be gradual, and you might not realise that you have even done unlearning until a new habit is formed. There might be things that you're doing now that actually you are subconsciously unlearning old ways and practices, but you just haven't couched it as that. And then you'll suddenly realise, oh yeah, actually my whole mindset has shifted around this. And then finally, I think there's something around there are other signals that you can be alert to. So, and it's quite similar to what we were talking about in the risk conversation and the disruptive leadership conversation. So being alert to maybe assumptions that we're making and questioning, why do we think like that? Why do we act like that? Reviewing the mistakes that we might have made. So I know we've said it's not about doing something wrong, but sometimes it could be that, and not necessarily wrong, but just perhaps not got the outcome that you had hoped for, and learning from that. It might be from taking risks, and in doing so, you've got to do something different along the way. And it could be seeking views and input from other people that aren't the normal people who are in your circle of influence or your support network, who can perhaps highlight to you where you might need to focus on learning. And we see that particularly in diversity and equity issues, and challenging your own biases around particular things. You need to go into different spaces to understand what you might need to unlearn in terms of what you think.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't have put it better myself, Lee, because the things that I'd had written down in my notes were around, no, that's good, were written down in my notes were around that insight, feedback, and fundamentally, are we achieving what we set out to achieve? So if you've set out with an intention to achieve something and you're not achieving it, there might be something different that you have to do, and some of that might be about unlearning a behavior or a certain way of thinking in order to move you to that space to achieve it. So absolutely. And sometimes I think there's even a bit of your own gut feel and instinct in there that actually this way of operating as a leader for some reason just doesn't sit as comfortably with me now, and it's causing a level of discomfort, which means I might need to have a rethink about my approach in that space.
And we've talked about this in previous episodes, but I've referenced it earlier in this episode, but I can really clearly see in my kind of past career that moment in time where what I thought was true in terms of the leader I was showing up to be just stopped sitting right with me. And I had to take that moment to go, right, how am I going to show up authentically? What do I need to do differently? And how do I start to challenge my thinking, my reactions? How do I challenge reactions of other people as I go through that process? And all of that was an unlearning and unraveling. It's like, if you do knitting, you're frogging the jumper because it's never going to fit or whatever.
Some knitting terminology that I've just learnt there, because I am not a knitter, but I'm like, wow, I maybe want to be frogging. Who knew that was a thing in knitting? So yeah, sorry. I've now got a vision of what frogging might actually be. Anyhow,
it's not like the other word that animals do. It's nothing like that.
Right, moving us swiftly on, we have got into, you can tell we're on end of term happy vibes here. We're like, woohoo, last episode. It's party time. I literally had 2 sips of a beer. Look what's happened.
I said in one of the earlier episodes that
lightweight.
Before I've turned into a lightweight. Yeah, absolutely.
You see, because of the sound effect of the ice cubes, I'm keeping it all under control because I've only had the one big slurp at the start.
It's going to be my unraveling and downfall.
It's going to be your frogging, yeah, your frogging episode. So we have focused a bit on the individual and quite personal sort of unlearning. And because this is the end of series episode, and we start the series most times with a kind of general few thoughts about the state of leadership today, I thought it might be an opportunity to bring it back to that wider kind of leadership piece by asking you, Lee, for your thoughts about what you might think leaders need to unlearn for 2024. And I know I'm potentially creating one of the biggest Lee soapbox moments ever, but I'm going to go there. Because we've got views and opinions and we're happy to share them. That's why we do the podcast. So in terms of that broader leadership unlearning for 2024, what are your thoughts, Lee?
I really had to try and contain myself with what I could focus on. So I've got a few ideas. I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox,
okay,
because it's not going to serve my well-being greatly.
Being boundaried and thinking about what you need as a leader in this too. So I'm loving that. Good role modelling.
So I think for me, saying things to win popularity contests, and even that unlearning around I need to stay polite and I need to try and people please. I think we need leaders to be standing up and acting with integrity all the more now. So for me, I think that's a real thing around unlearning. What does it mean to be a popular leader? And does that mean I have to do things that don't align with values, etc., etc.? I think there's something for me about unlearning the concept of time. This is a big thing for me this year, like how we view time and manage time. And I'm seeing more and more impatience in people who want everything now and moving on to the next thing really quickly. And I question, like, what for? Like, why? Why are we creating this urgency about stuff when it's going to sit in your inbox for a week before you get to it, and all you're doing is creating stress for your teams? So I think we need to unlearn this concept of how we manage ourselves and our people, and it links with that self-leadership piece. I also think it links with unlearning what it means to be in control, and feeling comfortable with letting go of control and stepping into letting people be adults. Let's just stop treating people like we're the parent and they're the child, and as leaders we know best. We don't. Boy, we don't. And we can see that with some of the people that's rising to the top in organisations. They do not know best. I'm getting on my soapbox. Let's step back down.
It's what the listeners come here for, Lee. Come on.
And then I think the other area, I mean, I'm really reining myself in here because I could literally just keep going and going and going. But I think there's something for me about unlearning what is normal in the workplace and in leadership, because I think normal has been thrown up in the air over the last couple of years. And yet all I'm hearing is organisations and leaders who are trying to go back to a time that I don't think necessarily was the greatest. And we know that with how people think and feel about the workplace. We know that with issues of equality and diversity. We know that with gender imbalance. We know that with so many indicators. Why are we harping back to go back to this place? The grass was not greener then. Like, let's get some reality. We need to unlearn what we think normal is.
I don't know where I go from here. There's so much in there, Lee. There's so much in there. And again, lots of similarity to things that came into my head when thinking about what leaders need to unlearn. And this parent-child thing and sort of the trust stuff and the going back to what it was like before was definitely high on my agenda, because I think we are really at a point in time where, we've got potential just to be taking so many steps backwards and not actually learning anything. Talking about unlearning, but we're not actually learning from, what could make an organisation feel like a great place to work, a great place to get a service or a product from, because we seem to have started to become obsessed with, we want to go back to what it was like before COVID. And I'm just a bit like, but why do we need to do that? Because we've proved people can work and operate in a different way. So what's the purpose in going back? And I think some of the argument around that is about that balance between what employees need and want and what the organisation is here to deliver. So I think we need to unlearn that desire to want to parent and to tell and dictate, and actually learn how to have open and transparent conversations about how you can compromise and get the best possible outcomes for as many people as you can. It's definitely something for me there.
And you think, politics, they want to go back. America, there is a real potential that we're going to have like the most awful person going back into the White House. That's a real and, present danger. That's a film as well, isn't it? Film Present Danger, I don't know.
Another niche reference. If anybody from the last episode still got their bingo card out.
But that's like, come on,
Yeah,
we
why?
need the reality check. Just the other day, Yorkshire Cricket reinstated a chairman who had to step down because they were racist. Like, come on, just because they can get some money.
So this absolutely leads me on to something I think we need to unlearn. Well, not we. I think we probably know this, but that some leaders need to unlearn about what reputation management actually means. Because I still think, and it has come back up to the surface with all of the stuff around the post office situation and Fujitsu, that actually in this day and age, reputation does not mean make sure the brand of our organisation at any cost to anybody is protected, because actually what we've seen in those old school examples of what happened many years ago is the reputation of the brand has not been protected at all. And understanding what makes up your brand, which is the way you behave, what you role model, the standards that you set for people, that's actually your reputation, feels like something we really need to just take stock of and just check in with people to go, look, we don't want this old school like reputation management vibe as a leader. We want you to just basically be doing the right thing, and your good reputation will therefore follow. And on that point, I just would say there's something for me about, can we also, I don't even know if it's possible to unlearn this because I don't know how to say the sentence, but can we also unlearn this kind of I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and not deal with anything until actually it becomes too much of a prominent issue and I have to deal with it. So again, the post office one, maybe even cricket one would be good examples of that, as in like, this has been going on for 20 years. Can we get away with it? We've got away with it for 20 years, but now there's been an ITV drama about it. We're going to take some action. Well, how many other things have been rumbling on for such a long time with total inaction? Is that what it's going to take? Like the media actually managing people to take leadership decisions because they put something into the spotlight is not the way I think people should be leading.
And this links back to my first point around, popularity contests, and stop trying to do things that you think will win you a popularity contest. That is something that's got to be unlearned. So it's kind of like a full circle, isn't it?
It is a full circle, and we stop the circle there because I feel like we could go on forever with that, and take up and another thing and take up the whole episode. But I did want to just throw that in there because we usually start a series with a sort of lowdown of what's happened in between. And I feel like we could end this series with what do we need to unlearn so that we can all be better leaders for 2024? Because we're still early-ish in the year. So we've got opportunity to make change and do things differently. So thank you for indulging me with that question, Lee. And I think you did really well in not getting into full soapbox mode for that one. So
my ring would tell me that I'm too stressed and I have to have a lie down. So I'm like, anyway.
Yeah.
I've got one of these wearable technology things that I won't mention the brand, but it will tell me if I'm my stress levels will arise in.
And we need to keep them at a nice even level so that you can be the best leader you can be without having to manage the impacts of that stress, Lee. So thank you. And I hope I didn't get you too stressed. I hope your wearable's not about to implode. So I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious that I've got a gin that needs drinking with ice cubes melting in it. So I am going to try to wrap us up in terms of this conversation. And we are all about the action here. So I wanted to know what advice and what action do you think that a leader listening to this could take around unlearning?
I think it's about recognizing that it's a work in progress. Absolutely starts with your self-awareness and an openness to change, reframe, challenge, whatever it is that you thought you knew. And I think that's your premise. That's the mindset stuff you need to do. What it is you choose to unlearn and when you choose to do it is a whole other kind of question. But let's get the self-awareness piece sorted first.
I love that. And I think for me, part of that self-awareness is just asking yourself the question, am I achieving what I set out to achieve? And using that as a measure of maybe then where you might want to focus some of your time and energy. And if I was going to give a plug to another episode in this series, if you haven't listened to it already, I think going back to the episode around self-leadership might also help get you into the right headspace, because part of that was around that there was lots of selves in the self-leadership piece, but part of that was around that awareness and insight. So in terms of your own development, I would suggest that might also be another good listen for you if you haven't heard that episode already. So that's the end. That's the end, folks. Of this series. I'm not saying that's the end, full stop. So this is very polite of you. It's back to your regal manner. You did raise your hand in a very regal way to go to your beautiful dress then, Lee.
What's your highlight of the series?
Oh, my highlight of the series. Well, apart from all the laughs, which obviously is which I love, because we are talking about really serious topics here when we're talking about leadership, and we are committed to wanting to support other people to make some sort of change, no matter how small, to challenge some of that leadership BS. But what I do love, and what I've loved, is that we have managed to have some laughs along the way, which I hope demonstrates some level of authenticity and what our relationship is like with each other. So I'll thank you for the laughs along the way. It's not because I've just said it, but actually for me personally, the self-leadership episode has really been one that I have reflected on a lot since we recorded it, and thought about a lot in terms of actions that I want to take over the coming months to help me with my development, but also getting some balance and really thinking about my next steps in terms of how I want to show up as a leader. And a lot of that has been about the self-care piece, because I have spent some time neglecting the things that mean I'm possibly not bringing my best self always into the leadership space. And it's easy to think, because they're things to do with home and health and getting a balance somewhere else, that actually you should neglect it to be totally focused on the work and the business stuff. So for me, that probably has been my highlight for a totally selfish reason, because it's helped me to reflect and rethink around, my own approach to things. So good question. Right back at you.
Well, I threw the question at you thoroughly unprepared of what my answer would be, and then realised as you were talking that you would do this.
Yeah, I would. Of course I would.
And I can barely remember what I was doing yesterday, far less what we've covered in this series. But I actually agree with you. I think 2024, the focus on self-leadership is a really important one. I think as we've come out of, not even come out of, we are in really challenging times still in many, many ways. And I think the pandemic gave an opportunity for people to think about what they wanted in life and careers and work and everything. And then we've started to slip back into what is normal. And I think this year is the opportunity to really start to try and harmonise what I thought and hoped then, and let's not lose track of that in the noise that's being created around us with it all. And personally, again, just that focus on, I can't show up and serve anyone to my best if I'm not showing up and serving myself first. And that isn't a selfish thing to think or feel or do.
Well, cheers to that, Lee. There could not possibly have been a better ending to the series. So I hope if that's the only thing that listeners take away, please do take that away and consider that as you make progress in your leadership journeys, careers, whatever. I want to thank everybody who's listened to this series of How to Take the Lead. It's been a pleasure, as always, having these conversations and challenging some of my own thinking along the way. So the biggest thank you has to go to you, Lee, for continuing with our How to Take the Lead collaboration. So thank you.
And also, I on like, not to extend this conversation, because I feel like, we've got
you did the good ending, and then we're like, pulling away from it.
To play, but
boo, get her off.
in the whole self-leadership piece, one really important step that we've taken this year with the podcast is to get external support, and it's been an opportunity for us to free up and change how we use our time when it comes to the podcast, so that we can focus on supporting people in a different way. So I think that's a good leadership proactive action. So thank you to our editor and people who've supported us.
Absolutely. That is definitely an important thank you, because it has made the world of difference to how we are spending our time and self-leading. So huge thank you. So now we can do the cheers, give ourselves a pat on the back, and most importantly, say thank you to the listeners who've stuck with us, and also to those who might be new and have only just found us. We hope to bring more great content your way over the rest of the year in whatever shape or form that might take. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the series, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit follow to make sure you get the next episode. And if today's discussion resonated, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
We also have our Substack community where you can get behind the scenes info, ask us anything sessions, and build your network with like-minded leaders. Visit howtotakethelead.substack.com to find out more.
And if you want to work with us to challenge and change leadership in your organisation, get in touch by dropping us an email, howtotakethelead@gmail.com, or DM us on the socials. Until next week,
Get out there and take the lead.